Welcome to the Smart Keys podcast. Imagine your hands are completely tied behind your back, but you just drafted, edited, and sent off a 500-word email simply by thinking about it.
Yeah, which sounds completely wild, right?
Totally wild. Because, for decades now, our relationship with technology it's been fundamentally bottlenecked by human anatomy. Like, we carry these massive supercomputers in our pockets.
Right.
We rely on servers doing, billions of calculations a second. Yet to actually get our complex ideas into those machines, we're still literally relying on clicking plastic buttons on a keyboard or dragging a mouse across a physical desk. It's a strict physical speed limit on human thought.
And that speed limit is precisely what's about to disappear. I think when people hear the term brain-computer interface or BCI, it's really easy to instantly jump to science fiction.
Oh, absolutely. Cyborgs, the Matrix, all of that.
Exactly. We picture this distant dystopian future where we're all plugged in, but the reality is far more practical, and, well, it's happening right now. We are actively moving away from mice and keyboards towards systems that translate electrical brain signals directly into digital commands.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this deep dive to unpacking a brilliant, comprehensive article from smartkeys.org by Felix Römer. It's titled Brain-Computer Interfaces: The Next Frontier in Workplace Tech.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
It really is, because this is no longer just some medical miracle confined to a university lab. It's rapidly becoming a strategic resource for modern professionals. The goal of this deep dive is to extract the actual practical value of BCIs. We want to help you understand how they're going to impact the future of work, business efficiency, and, well, your own daily workflows.
Right, because before a business can even begin to think about adopting this technology, we need to strip away that sci-fi veneer. We have to understand what it actually is, biologically and technically.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on a basic level, I need a plain English definition here. How on earth does a fleeting thought in my head actually become a specific command on a spreadsheet?
Well, it all comes down to the fundamental biology of your brain and the physics of electricity. Your brain consists of billions of neurons, right?
Yeah.
And they communicate with each other using electrical impulses.
Okay.
So when you form an intent to do something, say like moving your right hand to type the letter A, specific neurons in your motor cortex fire off tiny voltage changes. We call these spikes.
Spikes, got it.
Yeah. These spikes are incredibly fast, highly localized signals that carry very specific granular intent about movement. But alongside those individual spikes, you also generate what are called local field potentials.
Local field potentials. Okay, so how do those differ from the spikes?
Think of it like this. If spikes are the micro-level data, local field potentials are the macro-level data. They are slower, broader, more rhythmic waves of electrical activity. They reflect the overall state of your brain at that given moment.
Like my mood.
Sort of, yeah. Like whether you're highly focused or completely mentally fatigued.
I love visualizing this. Like if we think of a really busy office floor, those voltage spikes are like the distinct individual words someone is saying in a specific conversation at a desk in the corner.
They're like that, yeah.
They're precise, they carry exact instructions. Local field potentials, on the other hand, are like the overall hum and tone of voice in the entire room.
Yeah.
You might not hear every specific word, but you instantly know if the room is, stressed out, relaxed, or energized.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. So a BCI system essentially uses physical sensors to listen to both the specific words, the spikes, and the overall tone of the room, the local field potential.
Okay, so it's capturing all that noise.
Exactly. And once those sensors capture that raw electrical data, they feed it into a decoder. This is where machine learning actually bridges the gap between biology and technology. The decoder analyzes those incredibly complex electrical patterns in real time, identifies the intent behind them, and translates them into a digital command that a computer operating system can understand.
And I think this is important to point out, this isn't just a sudden invention of the recent AI boom, right?
Yeah.
Because to the average person, it kind of feels like brain interfaces just appeared out of nowhere in the last couple of years.
Oh, not at all. This is a deeply maturing science. It's actually been building for a century. We have to go way back to 1924.
Wait, 1924?
Really?
Yeah. A German psychiatrist named Hans Berger first discovered how to record human brain activity from the outside of the skull. He used an early version of an EEG, which is basically a hairnet covered in metal sensors that measure electrical activity through the scalp to identify alpha waves.
Wow, so that proved the signals could be captured way back then.
Exactly. And then fast forward to 1973, a researcher named Jacques Vidal at UCLA officially coined the term brain-computer interface. He successfully challenged the scientific community to use those EEG signals to navigate a simple maze on a computer screen. So the foundation is literally decades old. And if I recall from the source material, the massive leap forward really happened in the 90s and early 2000s, right?
Yep, that's right.
That's when we saw those famous animal studies where monkeys were literally driving cursors and robotic arms using just the electrical activity from their motor cortex.
Exactly. Researchers like Miguel Nicolelis and John Donahue, they proved that if you implant sensors directly into the brain's motor cortex, you can capture a much higher fidelity signal. And that research directly paved the way for the early brain gate trials in the 2000s, where the first paralyzed human patients received implants. They actually successfully controlled robotic hands and computer cursors with their thoughts.
Incredible. But something crucial happens when we move from, just moving a cursor in a lab to actual everyday typing. The technology have to learn how you specifically think.
Right. And that introduces arguably the most critical concept in modern BCI technology, closed-loop feedback.
By the closed-loop system.
Yeah. Think about your current keyboard. The plastic keys don't learn your typing style. They just sit there. But with the closed-loop BCI, the machine learning algorithm and your biological brain are adapting to each other continuously in real time.
Oh, wow.
The system decodes your intent, you see the cursor move on the screen, and your brain naturally adjusts its signaling based on whether that movement was correct or incorrect.
So it's basically neuroplasticity happening in real time.
Precisely. And at the exact same time, the algorithm updates its understanding of your unique neural patterns. This mutual adaptation is what drives accuracy up over time. It dramatically reduces the user's cognitive fatigue, and it helps the system stay calibrated even as your brain signals naturally fluctuate throughout the workday.
Okay, so we've established that the brain creates these electrical signals and machine learning decodes them. But here's the physical bottleneck, right? If the skull is muffling those electrical waves so badly, like trying to listen to a conversation through a thick concrete wall, how do we get a clearer picture without literally drilling into a healthy employee's head?
Well, that brings us to the hardware spectrum.
Right. What are the actual devices a business would purchase?
So the hardware spectrum is entirely defined by signal clarity versus invasiveness. On the most accessible non-invasive end, you have devices that just sit outside the head. We talked about EEG, but there's also FNIRs.
FNIRs, that's the one with the light.
Exactly. FNIRS works by shining near-infrared light through the skull to track blood flow and oxygen levels in the brain. It's almost like how a pulse oximeter on your finger tracks your heart rate. You can wear these like a normal pair of headphones.
And the article specifically highlights Neurable in this space, right?
Yes. Neurable is a great example. They're building consumer-grade neuro headphones like the N10 or the MW75 Neuro. They look exactly like premium noise-canceling headphones, but they are focused entirely on everyday productivity. They track your local field potentials, that overall room tone we talked about, to measure your focus and provide analytics on your work habits. They are incredibly easy for an IT department to deploy. But because they're reading signals through the bone of the skull and the tissue of the scalp, the data is heavily muffled.
So they're great for knowing if my brain is getting tired during a long meeting, but they are absolutely terrible if I want to write a complex financial report at top speed using just my thoughts.
Right, exactly. If you want that kind of high bandwidth control, you need to get closer to the source. Which brings us to the fully invasive options.
Here we go.
This is the hardware dominating the news cycle right now. Companies like Neuralink, they use a surgical robot to implant flexible threads directly into the brain tissue, boasting over 1,000 channels of data. Or Paradromics, whose Connexa system uses a tiny array of over 400 microneedles that physically penetrate the cortex.
400 needles.
Yeah. The bandwidth you get from being inside the brain is massive.
See, I have to stop you there, though, because if I'm an operations director, my mind immediately pushes back on this. I mean, I can barely get my team to update their software passwords on time. The idea that a corporate HR department is going to ask an employee to undergo elective open brain surgery just to click a mouse a little faster, that sounds legally and practically absurd.
Oh, it is absurd for a general workforce, and the scientific community completely acknowledges that. What's fascinating here is a concept in neuroengineering known as the butcher ratio.
The butcher ratio, yikes. That sounds incredibly grim.
It is a stark reality of biology. The Butcher ratio refers to the brutal trade-off between the amount of healthy tissue damage you cause during implantation versus the number of useful data channels you acquire.
Oh, I see.
The human brain does not like foreign objects. When you penetrate the tissue, the immune system responds by creating glial scars around the electrodes. And over time, that scarring acts as insulation, which actively degrades the electrical signal you were trying to capture.
Wow. So not only is the surgery a massive barrier, but the device might actually lose effectiveness over time because your brain is defending itself.
Exactly. Fully invasive implants are transformative, life-saving tech for individuals with severe neurological conditions, but they are completely off the table for general enterprise adoption right now. And that is why the middle ground, partially invasive devices, is where the most exciting commercial breakthroughs are happening.
Okay, the ideal middle ground. So not a headset that barely picks up a signal, but not a surgical drill into the cortex either.
Right. And there are two primary approaches here. The first is ECOG, which stands for electrocorticography.
ECOG.
These devices sit directly on the surface of the brain, but crucially, they do not penetrate the tissue. Precision Neuroscience is a major player here. They've developed a thin-film ECOG device called the Layer 7 cortical interface. It's essentially a flexible piece of film that conforms to the shape of the cortex. It is slated for FDA clearance in April 2025.
But even that requires removing a small piece of the skull to slide it in, right?
Yeah, yes.
Now, the second approach in this middle ground, the endovascular approach, is the one that completely blew my mind when I read the source material. Explain how this works, because it circumvents the skull entirely.
Oh, it is an absolute engineering marvel. A company called Synchron has developed a device called the Stentrode. Instead of drilling through the skull, surgeons actually thread a tiny stent packed with sensors up through the jugular vein in your neck.
Up through the neck.
Yeah. They route it through your body's natural vascular highway until it parks in a blood vessel directly adjacent to the motor cortex. It simply reads the brain's electrical signals through the wall of the blood vessel.
That is staggering. Threading the needle through the bloodstream.
It completely bypasses the brain's immune scarring response because the device remains inside the blood vessel. Synchron implanted their first U.S. patient back in 2022, and they are already partnering with tech giants like NVIDIA and Apple to integrate the hardware.
That's huge.
This approach drastically lowers the surgical complexity. I mean, it's an outpatient procedure similar to placing a heart stent while still providing enough signal fidelity to support thought-driven clicks and typing.
Okay, so we've broken down the biological mechanics, and we've navigated the hardware from headsets to jugular stents. Now we have to pivot to the why. Why does this actually matter for you? Because at the end of the day, an enterprise isn't buying this for the novelty factor. They are investing for competitive advantage and immediate workplace application.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the most profound and immediate impact of this technology is actually in accessibility and return-to-work pathways.
Absolutely. Consider employees who have suffered motor impairments, spinal cord injuries, or strokes. Historically, if a skilled professional loses the physical use of their hands, navigating a modern digital-first workplace becomes incredibly difficult, if not entirely impossible.
Right.
BCIs changed that paradigm by enabling true hands-free typing, clicking, and software navigation.
And we have to recognize that this goes far beyond just corporate productivity metrics. This is about protecting human dignity. We're talking about mind writing, giving a professional who has suffered a physical trauma the ability to maintain their career, their independence, and their voice. It keeps immense hard-earned talent in the workforce that would otherwise be permanently sidelined.
Well said. And we have the clinical proof that this isn't just theoretical anymore. The speed benchmarks achieved in recent trials are already viable for real-world business collaboration. For instance, a recent Stanford study demonstrated that Imagine handwriting could be decoded by a BCI at 86 characters per minute.
Wait, 86 characters per minute. But let's pause and explain the mechanism there, because it's fascinating. The AI isn't reading the English word in their head, right?
Exactly. The system isn't reading a dictionary in your mind. The user imagines the physical motion of their hand holding a pen and tracing the loops and lines of a specific letter, like the curve of an E.
Oh.
The BCI captures the specific motor intent, those voltage spikes we discussed, sent from the brain to the hand, and the machine learning decoder translates that intended movement into text on the screen.
That is just brilliant. And the speeds are only getting faster. Like, UCSF recently used a high-density ECOG system to decode intended speech and facial movements at 78 words per minute.
Incredible, isn't it?
And the BrainGate trials have hit 90 characters per minute for thought-controlled typing, but 78 words a minute for speech. That is basically conversational speed. That completely changes the game for someone who is paralyzed.
It really does. What stands out to you? Is it the 78 words per minute or the fact that a headset can tell when your brain needs a break? Because while those speeds are revolutionary for accessibility, what actually expands this technology to the broader able-bodied workforce is the other side of the coin, the cognitive load monitoring. We're looking at a future of smart environments.
Right, using those non-invasive headsets to track the local field potentials we talked about.
Exactly. Imagine consumer wearables that track your brain's rhythmic waves to detect genuine neural fatigue. Instead of a manager blindly guessing if a software development team is overworked, the system biologically knows when your brain physically needs a break.
Wow.
And it can automatically personalize your workflow or enforce downtime. Or think about a complex control room or an AR/VR workflow. Your digital environment could adjust to your thoughts. You intend to pull up a complex schematic, and it simply appears, drastically reducing the physical context switching and the cognitive load that drains our energy throughout the day.
Okay, the value is undeniable. The translation speeds are there. The accessibility use case is both a moral and an operational imperative.
Yeah.
But if you're an operations director, a CIO, or a manager listening to this deep dive right now, you're probably pacing your office asking the ultimate business question.
Which is?
How does a company actually start using this tomorrow without creating an absolute legal, ethical, and PR disaster?
Yeah, it is a massive governance challenge. But you cannot afford to ignore the market forces driving it. This sector is projected to grow from nearly $2 billion in 2023 to over $6.2 billion by 2030.
That's a huge jump.
If you wait until neural interfaces are ubiquitous, you are already years behind your competitors. The enterprise playbook has to start with your pilot strategy. You must start small. Pick a single, clearly defined metric like task accuracy for a specific data entry role, or time saved in a constrained space manufacturing operation.
And from a procurement standpoint, the source text stresses avoiding research-only toolkits like BCI 2000, right?
Yes, definitely.
Like, unless you happen to have a dedicated deep tech engineering team on staff, you need to be sourcing commercial-grade, fully supported software solutions.
Correct. But honestly, the pilot strategy is easy compared to the governance strategy. We have to talk about neural data privacy.
See, this is where my mind goes straight to the worst-case scenario. Because we are not just talking about keystroke logging here. Neural data captures fleeting thoughts. It captures pure, unedited intent.
Oh, absolutely.
If I start typing an impulsive, angry email to my boss and immediately delete it, my company's server only sees the deletion. A BCI might capture the initial angry impulse before I even realize I had it. If HR has access to my raw, unedited neural intent, I'd been fired a decade ago.
And that exact fear is why data governance is the single biggest hurdle to enterprise adoption. You simply cannot treat neural data like a standard IT analytic. It must be treated with the same rigorous security as highly sensitive health records. If you are integrating a BCI into an occupational health or accessibility program, you are immediately dealing with IPO compliance.
So what does that actually look like practically for an IT department?
It requires an architecture built on absolute privacy. Organizations must require strong, unbreakable encryption at the hardware level. They need strict role-based access controls. And most importantly, they need absolute separation of personal identifiers from the raw neural signals.
Right.
You cannot have a spreadsheet floating around human resources that links John in accounting to a specific neural fatigue pattern or a frustrated motor intent.
Which leads right into vendor valuation. You can't just buy the headset that has the most channels or the slickest marketing video. You have to look under the hood. How are their APIs constructed? Are they processing this deeply personal data locally on the edge? Or are they beaming it up to a vulnerable cloud server?
Exactly.
What is the total cost of ownership, and what are their specific service level agreements?
Furthermore, you must evaluate their regulatory roadmap. If a vendor is pursuing partially invasive tech, you really have to understand the acronyms defining their FDA pathways. Do they have breakthrough device status?
Right, which is the designation that speeds up FDA review for high-need medical therapies.
Exactly. Or do they have an IDE, an investigational device exemption?
Meaning they're legally allowed to conduct human clinical trials, right?
Yes. And have they achieved a 510K clearance, which proves their device is safe and effective compared to existing tech? A transparent, documented regulatory roadmap from the vendor is entirely non-negotiable.
But even if the vendor is perfect, and the IT architecture is flawlessly secure, there is still the human element of deployment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, change management is just as important, if not vastly more important, than the hardware itself. You cannot just drop neuro headsets on people's desks on a Monday morning and expect them to adopt them.
Oh, definitely not.
Policy must be established, heavily debated, and finalized long before the first device is ever powered on. What are your company's explicit rules for reasonable accommodations? How do you guarantee that participation is strictly legally voluntary? How do you proactively build culture and trust so that employees don't feel like their minds are literally being read by corporate management?
So what does this all mean? It means you have to treat a BCI pilot like any other rigorous, high-stakes enterprise IT system development. You need short, iterative deployment cycles. You need clear, strictly measurable metrics. And you need to share the deployment risk with the vendor. You're not just buying a new tool, you are building an entirely new operational muscle for your company.
To put a realistic timeline on it, we're looking at a 2 to 4 year horizon for the selective commercial rollouts of the more advanced, partially invasive systems like the endovascular stents. But the non-invasive monitoring tools, the focus tracking headphones, and the immediate accessibility pilots, those technologies are here right now.
It's kind of like installing the cybersecurity firewalls before you actually connect the sensitive servers to the open internet. Preparing for this future doesn't mean buying surgical implants today. It means rigorously auditing your IT infrastructure, your data security policies, and your HR accessibility structures right now, so that when the technology fully scales, your organization is safely prepared to integrate it. We've covered a massive amount of ground today: the biology of distinct spikes and rhythmic waves, the hardware spectrum from consumer headsets to jugular stents, the incredible benchmark speeds restoring human autonomy, and the strict playbook required to deploy this safely.
It's an exciting time, that's for sure.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over based on everything we've unpacked. If companies start using everyday consumer headsets to accurately monitor our focus and our neural fatigue, where exactly is the boundary between safely optimizing a worker's workflow and fundamentally invading the privacy of their inner mental state? When a machine reads your intent before you even move your hand, where does the keyboard end and the mind begin?
That is the big question.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Smart Cues podcast. We highly encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a deep dive into the technology shaping our future. And please, take the time to read Felix Römer's full, brilliant article. You can find the link to Brain-Computer Interfaces, the next frontier in workplace tech, right in the show notes. Until next time, keep thinking ahead.